What is up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live in a living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Let me say that one more time. DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me, yes, little old me, on the ones and twos, the digital wheels of steel at your next event. I like to do the weddings and the corporate parties and the karaoke jams. Yeah, I like it. I like doing it all. Parties are my specialty. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. But for today, let's learn together on What Makes You Smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Sunday, June 7th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, tens of thousands gathered throughout U.S. for protests. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets Saturday in several major U.S. cities, including Washington, D.C., New York, and Seattle, as well as smaller towns across the country to protest against police brutality 2 weeks after George Floyd was killed in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The movement has also spread around the globe. Demonstrations have been occurring throughout the U.S. for days now, but Saturday's rallies stood out for their sheer size, especially the one in the nation's capital, where the crowd worked its way to the White House. Most of the events also took place without major incident after more than a week of sometimes violent discord between police officers and protesters. This is according to the New York Times and Reuters. Number 2, global coronavirus deaths surpassed 400,000. The confirmed global coronavirus death toll has surpassed 400,000 per data collected by Johns Hopkins University. The number of confirmed infections worldwide is approaching 7 million. The United States, which is nearing 2 million infections, accounts for more than a quarter of the global death total, with nearly 110,000 since the outbreak began. The United Kingdom has the second highest fatality count at 40,548, followed by Brazil, Italy, and France. Brazil on Saturday stopped publishing a running total of coronavirus infections and deaths, though it reportedly still shows the figures from the previous 24 hours. Cases continue to grow in several other countries, including Russia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. This is according to Al Jazeera and Johns Hopkins University. Number 3, 2 Buffalo police officers charged with assault. 2 Buffalo police officers, Robert McCabe and Aaron Torgalski, were both charged with 1 count of second-degree assault Saturday, prosecutors said, after they were seen on video Thursday shoving a 75-year-old man to the ground during protests against police brutality. The officers have pleaded not guilty and were released without bail. The video sparked outrage across the country, which intensified when the Buffalo Police Department said the protester, Martin Gugino, tripped and fell. Gugino was hospitalized with a head injury resulting from the fall. He is now in, quote, serious but stable condition, end quote, and is, quote, progressing in his recovery, end quote. McCabe and Torgalski were suspended without pay Friday, prompting their 57 colleagues on the Buffalo Police Department's emergency response team to resign from the unit, but not the police force altogether, in their defense. This is according to the Associated Press and NPR. Number 4, Bush among prominent Republicans who reportedly won't support Trump's re-election. Former President George W. Bush won't support the re-election of President Trump, the New York Times reports. The news isn't shocking, considering Bush didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but the Times notes the reproach, quote, carries a different weight when an incumbent and his shared agenda with Senate leaders are on the line, end quote. Other prominent Republicans who reportedly won't or may not vote for Trump are Jeb Bush, Senator Mitt Romney, Republican Utah, and Cindy McCain, the widow of the late Senator John McCain, Republican Arizona. It's unclear if any of them will vote for the Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. though McCain is expected to. This is according to the New York Times. Number 5. OPEC allies agreed to extend oil production cuts. OPEC and its allies agreed Saturday to extend their record oil production cuts until the end of July, while Iraq and Nigeria agreed to extra cuts from July to September after exceeding production quotas in May and June. In April, negotiations led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, OPEC agreed to slash oil production by 9.7 million barrels per day between May and June to prop up prices that collapsed as a result of the coronavirus crisis. While the limits were expected to loosen at the end of June, the group decided it was best to remain cautious amid an uncertain global demand. U.S. Energy Secretary Dan Broilette praised the agreement. This is according to the Wall Street Journal and Reuters. Number 6. Sheriff's deputy killed in alleged ambush in California. Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller, a Santa Cruz County, California sheriff's deputy, was killed and 2 other officers injured Saturday in what law enforcement officers described as an ambush. Gutzwiller was 38. Several deputies responded to a call about a suspicious van parked in the Santa Cruz Mountains that the caller said had guns and bomb-making materials inside, Sheriff Jim Hart said. When the deputies arrived, the van drove off, and they followed, but were met with gunfire and explosives. The suspect fled the scene, but was eventually found and arrested. Hart said Gutzwiller, who was married with 1 child and another on the way, was a, quote, beloved figure, end quote, at the sheriff's office. This is according to the Associated Press and NBC News. Number 7. Libya's UN forces launch offensive as Haftar calls for ceasefire. Libya's United Nations-backed Government of National Accord said they launched an offensive against renegade military commander Khalifa Haftar's forces Saturday to seize the strategic city of Sirte, which is the last major settlement between the country's west and east. Beyond it are Libya's main oil export ports, Haftar's most important asset in the conflict. Haftar, meanwhile, has called for a ceasefire to begin Monday morning, along with one of its key allies, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. But the GNA did not appear to be receptive, responding that Haftar started the war. Quote, but we will choose the time and place when it ends. This is according to Al Jazeera. Number 8. Crowd heckles Minneapolis mayor after he rejects the idea of defunding police department. Minneapolis, Minnesota Mayor Jacob Frey was booed by protesters Saturday after they marched to his home to ask if he would commit to defund the city's police department in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. Frey, a former civil rights attorney who vowed to improve the police department's strained relations with minorities, said that he did not support defunding the police. In response, the crowd chanted things like, quote, go home, Jacob, end quote, and, quote, shame, end quote, as he walked away. Frey later said he favors, quote, massive structural reform to revise a structurally racist system, end quote, but he does not support, quote, abolishing the entire police department, end quote. This is according to Reuters and CNN. Number 9, Marine Corps to ban Confederate battle flag. The United States Marine Corps on Friday issued a directive to remove and ban displays of the Confederate flag at Marine installations, including items such as mugs, posters, and bumper stickers. The announcement comes at a time when protests responding to issues like police brutality and racial injustice have taken hold over much of the U.S. Quote, current events are a stark reminder that it is not enough for us to remove symbols that cause division. Rather, we must strive to eliminate division itself, end quote. General David Berger, the commandant of the Marine Corps, said in a statement earlier this week. The Marine Corps, in a statement on Twitter on Friday, said the Confederate battle flag has, quote, all too often been co-opted by violent extremist and racist groups, end quote, and has, quote, no place in our Corps, end quote. This is according to the New York Times and CBS News. Number 10, Tropical Storm Cristobal nears Gulf Coast. Tropical Storm Cristobal advanced towards the U.S. on Sunday. The storm is expected to make landfall at some point during the day with threats of flooding and tornadoes. Heavy rain has already hit parts of Louisiana, Florida, and Georgia, and is expected to continue up the Mississippi Valley into the upper Midwest early this week. A tornado also hit downtown Orlando, Florida on Saturday night, just missing a group of protesters. No injuries were reported. Cristobal had weakened to a tropical depression while moving over Mexico, but was upgraded to a tropical storm again after gaining steam while over the Gulf. The storm will likely continue to strengthen until it makes landfall, but it is not expected to grow into a hurricane. NBC News and the Weather Channel. That's 10 things you need to know today for Sunday, June 7th, 2020. Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone's doing reasonably well. Drop me some comments. Let me know what you're up to in this time. Also, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. Peace. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube. Username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.